Looking for the perfect way to say I love you, thank you, or to just brighten someone's day? With Mr. Roses, you can say all that and more with their stunning range of luxurious, long-lasting roses, handpicked for their beauty and elegance. And the best part? With same-day delivery available, you can send that special someone the perfect gift, even at the last minute. Visit mrroses.com.au now to find that perfect gift for that perfect someone. Mr. Roses, proud sponsors of the Ouzo Talk podcast. There's no Ouzo Talk without a bottle of Ouzo, which is why we love the Greek Providor. Get a real taste of the very best produce that Greece has to offer. From olive oils and delicious artisan sweets to unique spirits, earthy herbs and memorable wines. Visit thegreekprovidor.com.au to see their amazing range. The Greek Providor, proud sponsors of the Ouzo Talk podcast.
Sound is.
Nick Athanasiou, I can scarcely believe it. We have reached season 4 of Ouzo Talk.
Mate, how good is that? We are back, Tom. Mate, we're sitting here with an Ouzo in hand. Got great guests. Staring at you again, mate. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? No.
Oh, mate, I'm used to it at this point. I mean, this has become a bit of a marriage. This has become a relationship of unhealthy proportions, let's say.
Classic, mate. Look, it's going to be a massive year. Look, we did have a bit of help, didn't we? We had a young sort of lucky assist us during the off season.
Shout out to Souvlakis, aka Cypriot Smurf. I mean, that video did pretty well. I think we sacked him though, didn't we?
He did. I think he's still floating around.
Yeah, you've seen him around here?
Yeah, I don't think he's left Australia, so he's still sticking around.
Okay.
No, it's good. Like it's going to be a massive year. And look, I'm heading to Greece as well. I'm actually locked in. I know I said that in the last season, but
I'm so happy that you've done this. Honestly, I mean, we've been saying it for years, mate. You've got to be going every year.
Yeah,
you can do it. So
yeah, I couldn't go last year because of bloody annual leave. Didn't have enough. But now I'm locked in. Ticket, Athens, accommodation booked. And I've got to work out which way. I'll go Peloponnesus or Crete, but we've got a lot of time to think about it.
Plenty of options. The world is your oyster now, mate.
It is.
You're about to start your Greek Odyssey this year.
I am. And every year, like you said.
You better, mate. I'm going to start living vicariously through you because, mate, it gets hard. I mean, I'm preaching to the converted here. But, I mean, when you've got young kids, they're in school and whatnot, it's obviously harder to do. But you're in that rare position now where, mate, the kids are growing up, they've got jobs, they don't necessarily need to have you around 24/7. Mate, take full advantage.
Exactly. I guess the biggest issue for me was just aligning my work and annual leave. So it's good I didn't work no annual leave in 2023. So now every year I can go for 4 weeks because it would have been unjust going there for 2 weeks. It's not worth it. I
agree.
Yeah, 4 weeks minimum in my view. But it's all happening, mate. It's going to be a massive year, and we've got some great shows lined up. Again, we can't spill the beans too early, but we've got some really good shows locked in, at least up until the next, several months.
We're very well prepared this year. We've got episodes that are already lined up, episodes that are already recorded, so I hope they keep.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think it will. And look, just before we move on, a massive shout out to a guy called Mike Grigoris. He's a guy from Montreal who reached out to us. It's a good name.
Sounds good.
I like the name. He's from Montreal. And he said he was listening to our Tsipro episode in minus 25 degrees.
Mate, you would have been in perfect company with us. We were buffheads about it. We did it in the middle of summer.
Yeah.
You must down up all the anthropy, but it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
Mate.
So big shout out to Mike and all the Greeks in Montreal, or all the Phil Hellenes in Montreal. Supposedly there's between 80 and 150,000 of them.
Yeah, wow.
So you're on season 4, episode 1.
How good is that? And shout out to all of our listeners all over the world as well. We know they're tuning in from the US, they're tuning in from Canada, as you say, they're tuning in from the UK, in Greece, all over Australia. There's people in bloody Ethiopia listening.
Yeah, mate. South America. We got Brazil, Argentina, Europe, all through Europe, Bulgaria. We've got friends in Turkey. They write to us as well. So we're everywhere. And I'm glad they're tuning in.
Mate, Ouzo Talk, it's the place to be. It's the brand, isn't it?
Classic.
Well, let's get into it because, true to form, we have another fantastic episode, or at least, I mean, it's something that we've been wanting to do for the last few years. We've been trying to find the right people to do this episode for quite some time now, and it's finally happened. and it's all about Byzantine chant. And most people would know that form of music, that art form, from church. Now, I mean, what's your earliest exposure to that? I mean, it would have been church, right? Up the road here.
Yeah, it was all the psalty punching out those tunes in the church. Yeah, it had a good memory in my head, it reminded me of family, church, unity, but I think it's a lot more than that now, and I don't know too much about it, so I think we are excited having this guest on who's going to tell us all about it.
It is an art form, and it is a form of music that, I mean, I feel like it doesn't get the raps as much. I mean, our guest is obviously going to give us a much better insight into this, but we're very much outsiders when it comes to this sort of stuff. For me personally, listening like yourself, to psaltes at church and whatnot, they weren't always good though, growing up. There were a lot of guys there who probably, I don't know, they wouldn't have passed the audition. And actually that was that was one of the things that me and my cousin James actually used to say. We'd be sitting in church and he'd say something to me like, "Can you imagine what the blokes that missed out on this audition were like?"
Yeah. Classic.
Thankfully, though, in particular, I've got to give a shout out because we got a St. Spiridon church. Huge shout out to those guys. Amazing.
They're good.
Holy crap.
You got quality guys there.
Yeah. And obviously at Cogra. But before we get into
But it is getting better. You're right. In the 80s, it was bad. It sounded like they were, dying or something. But now, the last 5-10 years, we've got really good psaltis, really good singers out.
Well, I think part of the reason is because of the guy we've got in the room. So without any further ado, let's introduce him. So, you ready for season 4?
I am, mate. Let's go. Kick off.
Let me introduce him. So our guest today is the founder and director of the Melisma Ensemble and lead chanter or protopsaltis of the Parish of the Resurrection at Cogra in Sydney, and is a teacher of Byzantine chant and folk music with a special interest in the music of the Eastern Mediterranean. So he's perfect for this.
Wow.
He studied music in both Greece and Australia, holds a music teacher diploma in Byzantine chant from Philippos Nakas Conservatorium in Athens, and has lectured on the form extensively. As an extra few strings to his bow, though, he also plays the oud, the kanonaki, or kanun, as well as other stringed instruments of the region. Joining us in the studio today, our first guest for Season 4, Dimitris Koubaroulis. Welcome to Ouzo Talk, my friend.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here.
Great to have you, mate. We're ready to go.
Absolutely. So, Dimitri, mate, you're local to this area, aren't you?
I am. I actually live very close to here. I have been here in Sydney for 22 years, but I grew up in Greece. I can say that now I have 2 home countries. I've actually spent more time in Australia than I have in Greece now.
Yeah, wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, with a short stint in the UK as well. I grew up in Peloponneso, in a town of Pyrgos, and I spent most of my time in Peloponneso, and then I moved to Athens.
Yeah.
I studied computer science, but I always had music in my soul, I guess, and everything somehow revolved around music. And when I had the chance to whether make it a job or keep it as a passion, I chose the latter. So I kept it as a passion, which was a good decision, because I still feel the same as I felt so many years ago. It's never left me. It's always been one of the main reasons I enjoy life, if you like. So I'm very grateful for that.
Amazing.
The rest is history.
Well, we're so glad that you have taken the interest in the art form, let's say, and that particular type of music, because you're the man that's going to take us on that journey now. And mate, should we do the honours and start the episode properly? What do you think?
We will, mate. Let's go. Let's have a drink. Yamas Dimitri.
Yamas.
Yamas.
Καλό πρόγραμμα. Καλή σεζόν. Welcome. All right, so we are back, mate.
We are definitely back. And the great news is the Greek Providor has come on for another whole year.
Isn't it brilliant?
Us. How good is that?
Fantastic. Couldn't really do an Ouzo Talk without the Greek Providor at this point, really.
Exactly. I think you're right. If Crystal isn't around supplying us with his alcohol, amazing spirits, I don't know where we'd be, Tom.
I know. The GreekProvidor.com.au, again, you've been hearing it, since year dot when it comes to this podcast. When it comes to getting things for the bar or getting gifts or getting whatever the case is, you've got to try the Greek Providor out because, again, Crystal has done an amazing job getting premium products in from Greece. It's not your everyday standard stuff, is it? It's the good stuff. And she hand picks most of it, doesn't she?
Definitely. I think that's the best part of her job. She flies over and hand picks these quality goods.
I want to go with her. Honestly.
Classic.
So thank you so much, Crystal. Again, the Greek Providor. But mate, we've also got another sponsor this year, don't we?
We do. Yeah, how good is this? MrRoses.com.au are on board. They're going to be on...
Mr. Roses.
Mate, James Stevens is a champion guy in our community. He helps out a lot of the Greeks in the area, in business and so forth. So
very supportive of this show in particular, and a lot of other things as well, like Greek festivals and whatnot. Plays a really important role in again, another Greek business, let's say.
Definitely. And look, it is very successful. And look, Greeks help out Greeks, as we know. They're helping out us, and we're going to give him a big shout out on air, and hopefully you guys out there can support him as well. And the good thing is it's actually very good timing that Mr. Rose had come on board, because it's right? Valentine's Day.
It is.
So this episode comes out on the 5th of Feb. So what's that? 9 days. So all you gents out there, you got 9 days to get roses for your missus.
This is your public service announcement, boys. Okay. That's one of the reasons why I'm so glad that Mr. Roses is part of this now, because, mate, we're never going to forget now, are we?
Mate, can you imagine how many marriages me and you were going to save by saying this?
I know.
Boys, don't forget, get the roses to your missus.
You're welcome, is what we're saying.
Classic.
But also to the women as well. Oh. Hey, the boys want the roses too. Yeah. Let's be honest about that. Like, I'd be pretty impressed if I got it.
Really?
Come on. Yeah,
okay.
I would.
Sure.
But it's not just roses. There's other stuff on the website too. I actually bought something for my missus. There were chocolates there. There was teddy bears. There was all sorts of other stuff. And it saved me.
Yeah, exactly.
Same day delivery.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I was just going to say, I think there's 15 cities or towns or regions they deliver to all around Australia. So, for example, if you're in Sydney, if you ring before 4 p.m, you'll get the delivery on the same day.
So you can be as tardy as you want, basically. Try not to be, obviously. Yeah. But, guys, again, this is your public service announcement.
Yeah. Get
in early. Make sure you're booking it all in.
Yeah.
It's going to save you a lot of heartache.
Exactly, yeah. Look, get on the website, because anyone living in Brisbane or Melbourne, I think cut-off is 2 p.m. for you guys, but it does change. So get on the website, click, and it will give you a countdown of how long you've got, so you can arrive that day. So, and again, it's more than just roses, flowers, champagne, chocolates, you name it. So all you buffhead boys, get out there, mate. Hit up Mr. Roses.
Laughing. You're one of these blokes that forgets, right?
No comment.
Classic. So that's it, but it's just one phone call away. The thing is, you don't have to do anything. It's just one phone call.
One phone call, one online order, that's it.
Sit back, put your feet on the chair, hands behind your head, mate. I'll do the rest.
That's it. So thank you so much, Mr. Roses. Thank you to the Greek Providor as well. Now, let's get into the episode properly. I mean, we've done a little bit of your background, Dimitri, but where did your family by and large come from in Greece?
So both sides of the family come from Peloponneso, the Peloponnese. My dad's family comes from Ilia, and my mom's family from Arcadia. Mm-hmm. And I got to experience both, because we used to go for long holidays, the village of Vitina in Arcadia, in the mountainside, and then we had the beach for the summer. It was
beautiful.
It was amazing. Wonderful growing up there, and I'm the eldest of 4 siblings. It was just beautiful childhood growing up in Greece.
Yeah.
And
were your papudes from there as well? How far back did your ancestors go in Peloponnese?
As far as I know, from one side, my mom's side is also from Thrace as well, but my immediate grandparents are from those areas.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Thrace are renowned for their tsipro, aren't they, Tom?
They are.
Because we did mention that Dimitri did grab the tsipro. We gave him the choice. Sorry, tsikoudia. So he did grab the tsikoudia. So it could be a Thrace side kicking in that you didn't realise.
Totally be.
Could be. Actually, we didn't even mention what we're drinking today, really. It's a bit of a mix. We do have the 35N
tsikodia with honey.
Yeah, with honey. And then the Lazaris Ouzo, which is from Kerkira.
Yeah, that's what me and you are having.
That's what we're having at the moment. All available on the Greek Providor, let's say. But, again, we digress. But let me ask you, Dimitri, I mean, a lot of these people that are involved in music like this in Byzantine chant, there seems to be a little bit of a history when it comes to the family of, my papa was a psalti or something like that. Similar story with you, or are you the first?
Actually, not with Byzantine chant. With music, yes. My grandmother was playing the mandolin, but we didn't have singers in the family, at least not that I know of. So I guess just may have skipped some generations, perhaps. But the story was simple. Like our parents used to take us to church while we were young, and I was getting bored at church, and I was listening to this beautiful chanting, and I thought, oh, maybe this is going to be something to do, something more exciting, and be more immersed in, be more involved in what was happening. And what I realized very, very early on was that I could remember the tunes afterwards.
Wow,
I would go home, and then I was able to sing some of the pieces, like the Ouzo Theos or Christos Anesti or things like that, like nursery rhymes.
Yeah.
And then we did some in Sunday school as well, but mostly from church. I would go home, and then I was looking forward to go to church to hear them.
Wow.
And one thing leads to another. Then we used to go and stand next to the chanter's stand, next to the psaltiri. And by osmosis, then we started singing along, and then I guess, yeah.
So is that how it happened for you? Did it just happen by chance and osmosis that you started learning these things and then became involved?
Yeah. And then there's an interesting part of the story where my dad was trying to learn. He had this passion. He was trying to learn. And there was a class for adults going on in my local town there. Mm-hmm. And he said, would you like to come along? But it wasn't a kids class. I was a kid at the time.
Yep.
And it was this round class of people doing the first, like an audition, if you like. And since I was there, the teacher said, would you like to also do the audition? And I did the audition, and he liked what he heard. And he said, okay, we're going to start a class for children as well. So he did, and the next thing you know, like my brother is there, and my sister is there, and then 3 other kids are there, and now there's a class running for children.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a story.
It went
Good
for
way
years.
to start. Can you just explain to us what is Byzantine chant?
That's a great question. We've got Greek music. Mm-hmm. And Greek music dates back to the ancient times. Mm-hmm. What we have today as Greek music, it didn't spring from nothing. It's an evolution of music culture and the Greek culture, and not just the Greek culture, but all the cultures of the Eastern Mediterranean and the peoples that the Greeks interacted for thousands of years. Ancient Greece had an amazing musical system, both in theory. You may have heard of Pythagoras and the musical advancements that he made, and lots of others that we don't have time to expand now.
Sure. Yeah, I wasn't aware. So Pythagoras, the mathematician, pi squared. He was connected to music.
Yeah, he actually set some of the principles of mathematical descriptions of the notes and the intervals and how they relate to each other.
So am I right in saying, because I think if we harken back to the episodes that we've done on the bouzouki, so when we had Thanasi Polykadroti, I think they actually mentioned that the distance between, for example, on a bouzouki and a guitar and whatnot, that's actually measured in tatasta, the frets, are measured based on a Pythagorean equation. Is that right?
That's right. And one thing you
see,
one thing you may not know is that the instrument that Pythagoras used, it was called a canon, like from kanonas, the law of music. Mm-hmm. And if you extrapolate it, the instrument I play today is called the kanonaki.
Yes.
So it is a descendant of that name that was set in the 6th century before Christ. So.
What a beautiful instrument that is.
Yeah, well, what
honestly.
is it? Can you explain what it is?
So it's like a flat harp. It's like a zither, a flat zither you put on your lap, and it's got 26 or more triplets of strings. Yeah. And you play it horizontally. You pluck it with your fingers, and it sounds wonderful.
Wow.
It is a beautiful instrument.
I didn't know that.
No, you didn't know?
There you go. First lesson of the year. Eh? Well done. Pythagoras. I thought it was just maths. Little did I know.
No, he influenced a lot of things. Okay, so where did we head? We digressed a little bit there.
Yeah, so Byzantine chant. So, and what was the connection from ancient Greece?
So from ancient Greece, people kept that musical system even when Christianity came around. And instead of composing secular pieces, well, not just secular, but ancient Greek type pieces, they started composing Christian hymns as well, using the ancient Greek musical system. And the interesting part with the ancient Greek musical system is that the ancient Greeks used letters of the Greek alphabet in different rotations to indicate notes. They didn't have the notation, the Western notation that we have today. They had the Greek notation.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Looking for the perfect way to say I love you, thank you, or to just brighten someone's day? With Mr. Roses, you can say all that and more with their stunning range of luxurious, long-lasting roses, handpicked for their beauty and elegance. And the best part? With same-day delivery available, you can send that special someone the perfect gift, even at the last minute. Visit mrroses.com.au now to find that perfect gift for that perfect someone. Mr. Roses, proud sponsors of the Ouzo Talk podcast.
Okay, and what do you mean rotation? So an alpha
Rotation.
would be
They
upright.
would put it upside down, for instance.
turn
and
it to
that
the
would-
left
yeah,
or to the
turn-
right.
Exactly.
Wow,
And then they
didn't
would
know
use the punctuation marks as well.
Yep.
So if you had an oxia, for instance, you have a tono, or you have a varia, or you have a perispomeni, then the punctuation mark, they use them as musical symbols to indicate musical performance or intervals or modulations or all sorts of things.
So is this the root of that 8-mode system that I've heard about, or is that something completely different?
It is to an extent. So the 8-mode system came about by selecting some of the scales that existed. And there were dozens of scales that existed in the Eastern Mediterranean world at the time. Musicians were created, and they gave them names from where they came from, like the Ionian scale or the Dorian scale.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and there were more. There were scales from the Indians would have scales, the Arabs would have scales. Every civilization would have their own. The Persians, and there was crosstalk between them. The Greeks used to go to India to buy spices, and they would bring spices, but I'm sure they also brought ideas and sounds.
Couple of modes.
Exactly. Well,
Modes and scales.
if you think about it, the musical cultures of that region, they all have something in common, which is the microtones.
Yes.
They in the horizontal progression of the melody. So it's
You might
not
have to explain
not
that.
the vertical harmony. that
Nick's nodded off now.
you know Western music. You hear Western music, and you've got like chords, like when you play chords.
Yep.
But in Eastern music, there's less chords and more a unison melody, like one melody that is highlighted. Sometimes with a drone. You may have heard the drone at church, the
Yes.
ison. So some people hold a steady note as the drone, and then there's just one melody. But often there's no chords. At least not in the traditional music. There is very few.
Okay,
examples.
so it sounds like humming when they're humming. Oh,
That's right.
That's what's that?
Yeah, that's the ison. That's the drone.
That's the drone.
It's the drone.
Okay,
Yes.
great.
And we see other examples of that as well. In like when you listen to Scottish music as well with the bagpipes.
Yeah.
Similar sort of concept, I guess.
All right.
Yeah, and that's where the cross influences happen in all different ways. Like the Irish have the bouzouki, right?
Yes.
And the Arabs have the bouzuk.
So this drone, how long is that? Is that's the musical instrument, or is that the human voice?
Always human voice.
Human
so in
voice.
church.
In church.
But this is the interesting thing. Byzantine music is not only used in church. Byzantine music is the classical music of the Hellenic civilization. I call classical music to separate it from the folk music.
Wow.
So there is, and that's something many people don't realize, that Greeks have their own classical music civilization with classical composers, with a classical musical theory, with a classical musical system that takes years and years to learn and master. In the old times, it used to take 35 years, they said,
Wow.
to learn it. Now with the technologies and the systems we have, it's less, but still, it takes many years to master it. And that's classical music.
And I mean, that was going to be my next question. I mean, is it a strictly liturgical / ecclesiastical form of music? Clearly it isn't. This has roots well before Christianity,
Yes.
well before the Byzantine Empire. It has roots back into ancient Greece. And on the flip side of that, my understanding is that it's influenced modern day music as well. I mean, when you look at someone, for example, like Panos Kiamos, for example, my understanding is that he was actually a chanter before he became a singer.
Many singers claim their roots there. In fact, if you hear all the Rebetiko masters, they will claim that the scales that they used in Rebetika are descendants of the Byzantine scales, which are descendants of the ancient Greek scales.
So I didn't realize there's a Hellenic opera. So this was way before Jesus. Is that way before,
Well, Hellenic classical music, let's say.
Classical music, yeah. In a sense that this was the music that you didn't hear in the local villages. You heard it in the big auditoriums. You heard it in the big cathedrals. You heard it in Hagia Sophia. You heard it in the Byzantine palace, for instance.
Sure.
They had the palace had royal musicians, royal chanters. And these people were trained over many years, as I said before, and the music they perform and the instruments they perform and the compositions they perform, it's a unique musical style that we are very proud of. It is a unique heritage that we have, and I'm happy to talk about this later.
Well, what's the earliest representation of this type of music that's sort of recorded? Is there a ground zero for this that we point to?
Interestingly, the earliest recordings are from the beginning of the 20th century. Almost as soon as recording technology was developed, one of the first things that people tried to do was to capture the authentic style of Byzantine chant. So they went to Constantinople at the time, and they spoke to the head chanter of the Ecumenical Patriarchate, and they recorded a number of plaques, whatever you call them, the 78 RPMs.
Yep.
Yeah, and
78 records.
And I actually am very grateful that someone actually gifted me one of the original records.
Oh, wow.
So actually, this is one of my most treasured items.
Unbelievable.
In my collection. Yeah, it always takes me back to that first recording.
Wow.
Yeah, you actually raised a good question. You said, when was the first recording? They had no recorders back then.
Well, I didn't ask that question.
No,
right,
I know what you meant.
Yeah.
No, but I know what you meant, and he's answered it well. But how do we know how the music sounded? Like, was it written, and how do we know what those writings sounded like that?
That's a great question. Well, obviously, further back you go, the less you know about, because things have evolved over the centuries.
Sure.
But another thing that it's worth pointing out is that the Greek musical tradition is, I'm going to say the only one, but maybe there's one of the few, just to be, maybe the Chinese or some other old tradition has the same claim. But certainly we do know for the Greek musical tradition, it's the one that has been practiced uninterrupted for 3,000 years.
Wow.
Uninterrupted. It has evolved, it has changed, but there was never a time where it was lost and then people tried to resurrect it later.
Wow.
And that's extremely special.
That is an amazing claim to fame. When
So
you think of all of these amazing musical traditions around the world, this is the only uninterrupted one
that we know of. As I said, perhaps there is one more or two more, but it's extremely special to have that. Yes.
So we're talking about 1000 BC.
Potentially, yeah. That's
Far
from
out.
Pythagoras at least, yeah. But
Yeah.
obviously it goes beyond before that.
So really, I mean, we call it Byzantine chant now. In light of all that, it's probably not the right terminology, is it? It's a little bit misleading.
And they didn't call it Byzantine chant at the times of Byzantium. They call it ecclesiastical music or the Psaltic art from the Psalms, the Psaltis, the Psaltiki technique. And the secular music. So it was the same music, but when it was used to compose secular pieces, they used it the outside music, the outside the church music.
Right.
So they had music, which was the church music, was the pinnacle of composition. Like you've got in a town, you've got the church that stands out as a building, and people put all their care and decoration to make it as glorious as possible for the glory of God. And then it was the music for outside the church, because you can imagine what happened is that people would go to church and then they would go outside in the town square and they would have food and they would sing and they would dance using the same music that they used inside the church, but using for folk songs in this case.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I know, again, I think Tom's told me this about 1,000 times, but we're talking about acoustics. So
yes.
So the chanting, so inside the church, obviously it's a different sound because you got the beautiful dome and all that sort of stuff. But outside, would it sound a bit flat?
It would have.
Wouldn't sound the same, would it?
No, that's right. So they would have choirs, or they would have people with very loud voices in those days. They wouldn't have microphones. But it's a good question. Usually they would have, I don't know, smaller groups.
Yeah.
But generally, I've been to Panegyria in Greece, where someone with a strong voice can actually be heard. And usually, as you know, Greeks will join in and sing along as well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, just on that point, I mean, you and I have had this discussion before. There was you must know about it as well, I assume, Dimitri, but a few years ago, there was an NPR discussion that happened.
Yeah.
And it was on YouTube. And what they did, some acoustics experts were given access to Hagia Sophia after hours. They set up microphones around the church and they popped a balloon in the center in order to make a filter that you could then go to a neutral environment to record some chanting and whatnot, apply the filter, and you could hear what it was actually like. Are you aware of the story? Do you know anything about it?
Very much so. I've actually been to Hagia Sophia, but I wasn't able to sing with full voice.
Yeah.
I could only sing with soft voice. But I'm familiar with that, and it is fascinating, isn't it?
It's unbelievable.
People don't know that the history claims that Hagia Sophia only had 25 chanters in the choir. You would think that the massive space like that would have hundreds of chanters to be heard. But the acoustics must have been phenomenal, and the voices that they would have been exceptional. Handpicked, I'm guessing, from all around the Byzantine Empire at the time.
Wow. I mean, you hear the recordings. Some ensemble actually did a full recording and released an album with this filter on it. It is unbelievable to think to think that you could sit there and listen to that and think, wow, this is what our ancestors heard in that church.
Yeah.
This is what, I mean, like I'm thinking about it now and I'm getting goosebumps about it.
And it probably would have been better there because there's no background noise, there's no cars and traffic.
True.
So imagine how it would have sounded without that in the background.
I mean, it has that effect now even, again, just a few weeks ago we were at church, even just there in a standard Greek Orthodox church here, provided you've got the right people doing it and they're doing a good job, and fortunately in this case they were, it just brings on maybe it's because we've grown up with it, but I dare say that people outside of our tradition and our culture would feel the same way. Have you heard what other people have thought about that?
Well, in this case, there's a very famous story about Russian pilgrims going to Hagia Sophia. I think it's in the 11th century, and they heard this amazing chanting in that amazing space. And they said something like they didn't know if they were in heaven or on earth at the time.
Wow.
How the voices were projecting.
Because it's quite hypnotic, isn't it? When I hear it, I don't know, it puts you in a trance state. That's how I feel. It
can sometimes it can be relaxing, but then it also depends on the type and the song. It can also be quite alerting as well.
To that point, though, as well, I've also heard it being referred to as cherubic hymn. Is that something that's well known? I don't know if is that a technical term.
It is one specific type of chant that is called a cherubic hymn, and it's chanted in the divine liturgy. So every liturgy, if you go in the morning, then it will have that piece as part of the set.
So that's a particular.
It's a particular composition, if you like.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not a style.
It's
not a style. Yeah.
I'm learning here, Nick.
Yeah, good. So am I. So when did the name change to Byzantine Chant?
I think it probably changed when the name Byzantine Empire was coined, and I think it was 200-300 years after the Constantinople fell to the Ottomans.
Oh, so
people wanted to have a name to distinguish it from the Latin Roman Empire at the time, and they coined the term Byzantine, and then similarly the music also took that name. The Greeks never called it Byzantine until the 19th century or so. 20th century.
That's a late name. It's not.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
So did it come to power when, say, Constantine the Great became Roman Emperor? Is that when it changed, or did it have anything to do with that?
I don't think
it was
it
just
ever
always
changed.
there.
No, the name, I don't think it ever changed. It was all called ecclesiastical music, as far as I know. Yeah.
Okay. And when did it become prominent in the Roman Empire back then? Was it always prominent? Because it seems like it was the main source of music around that Eastern European era when Constantine the Great was around.
I don't know if there was a time in history where it was a turning point. I think, as I said before, it was just an evolution.
Yeah.
So the Christians took elements of the Jewish tradition and the ancient Greek tradition, the pagan tradition.
Yeah.
Plus, they put their own elements, and they created this. And then later on, when the Arabs came and the Ottomans came, then they assimilated some of the elements, as it happens with culture.
Yeah. Wow.
Amazing.
On 28th of May, 1453, I understand there was a liturgy happening before the Ottomans took over. Do you know any story around that and what the liturgy was at the time? This was the day of the invasion.
29th of May, yes, the fall of Constantinople. Look, part of it is legend, part of it is... But I wouldn't be surprised if some of it is also true. The legend says that when the liturgy stopped. The emperor Constantine was taken away and hidden inside the column or transported somewhere else, and he's going to come back one day
and finish it off.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the emperor used to take part in liturgy in that time, and those times he used to participate. He used to be, you know how the big procession happens. The emperor would be part of the procession.
Wow.
He would take part in the liturgy. Yeah.
Okay, so that was a legend. Okay, all right.
Well, is there anyone in particular that's played a really important role in the dissemination or the promotion of this as an art form and ecclesiastical music? I mean, one of the names that came up just in our research was Saint Romanos, the melodist. For me, as a musician, like this was a bit of a revelation for me. But can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And probably he's the first and probably the only saint that was attributed the name melodist, as in melodos.
Yes.
Wow. Great word.
Having said that, we don't know any music that he composed, but we do know that he composed ecclesiastical poems called the Kondakia, and not one or two, but 1,000 of them.
Wow.
Yeah, he's actually known to have composed 1,000 Kondakia. Not all of them are preserved to our times, but the ones that are preserved, like I Parthenos Simmeron, for instance, for Christmas, a very well-known poem, ecclesiastical poem, they are exquisite.
Do you know the poem?
I Parthenos Simmeron τον υπερούσιον τίκτη.
Can you sing it?
This is what Nick does to everyone. He puts them on the spot.
I can try.
Give us 10 seconds.
It goes like this. I Parthenos Simmeron τον υπερούσιον τίκτη και η το σπήλαιον το απροσίτο προσάγει άγγελοι μεταποιημένων δοξολογούσι μάγιδε μετάστερος οδηπορούσι δήμας γαρε γεννήθη παιδίων νέων ο προαιώνων Θεός.
Wow. How good was that?
Amazing.
That was brilliant.
6th century, the poem. The music, we don't know when it originated. Could be from then. We don't know.
Amazing.
Wow. So we're saying, what, 500 AD that poem was written? 600 AD.
That's right.
Far out.
That's right. In Constantinople at the time.
Yeah.
So
I
he
just
was
went somewhere else there for a second.
Mate, wasn't that peaceful?
Yes. Yeah.
I felt so...
I should have asked you to hold the drone. I didn't think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, you talk about the drone. That was brilliant. Awesome. So the drone is how long you can hold. Is it your breath and hum for that
No, it's
long?
like a second voice, if you like. So someone else, so one person chants like I did. That's the unison part where everyone sings the same melody, and then there's some other type of chanter who is like a supporting role, which holds the bass note, if you like.
Okay.
So they
like
hum it like
Should we try it?
Σώσον Κύριε των λαών σου και ευλογήσον την κληρονομίαν σου.
That's hard.
That's it. That's Byzantine chant, right?
Wow.
Fantastic. That's so good.
That's
What is that?
fantastic.
So
I've just ticked something off for me there. I've always wanted to do that.
you're going to be a psalty, mate. You're going to be a backup singer.
That's
You know
how you
what?
start. That's how. Don't give him.
That's how you
it's-
start.
That's how you start.
You know what?
Okay.
I have to. So my great grandfather was Absalti in Kerikera.
Right. Yep.
My Theo in the US in Pittsburgh is as well. I've always been interested in it, so that could be the start, Dimitri. You might have me as a teacher soon.
I teach at Kogar, by the way. If you
Oh, really?
I know.
Other Athanasios.
that's right.
Yeah,
We start lessons in early March. So if anyone's listening and would like to join,
Okay, early March, Cogra Church.
I might be there, mate.
See, I can't sing. I'm not musically minded at all. But you are. You guys are all musos.
We are.
Guitar, bouzouki, you sing, you do everything. So on the opposite. Wow. So how long can you hold that drone for? And how do you train for that? Like, I've heard people do the drone for 20 seconds, 30 seconds.
Yeah.
You must be doing a lot of training to get to that level.
It really depends on the vocal abilities of the chanter, but you don't really have to hold your breath for so long. You can stop and take breaths. And the trick is that you have more than one person, so people can take breath while the other person continues. So for the listener, it appears like it never stops.
Yes.
It's like a musical.
Got it.
Yeah.
Because in Aboriginal culture, they have a didgeridoo, and they do that reverse breathing.
Yeah.
So one person can continuously blow.
Yeah.
And I think the technique is
In through the nose, isn't it?
they blow, and then they fill their cheeks full of air, and then it's like you're squeezing your cheek, so that air's coming out, and you breathe in somehow.
That's right, yeah. Well, in this case, they have the didgeridoo to help, but with the vocal music, I don't know if that's possible. But in any case, in Byzantine chant, it's not needed.
Yeah.
You stop and take breaths. Usually, if you are the only person holding the drone, then you stop when the chanter stops. You take a breath, and then you start again afterwards. So,
Okay, amazing.
yeah. But people who are trained, people do vocal training the same way any singer does. They can hold their breath for a minute or two, or sometimes more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So it seems like it's become part of the church now. So you're saying it wasn't originally, but now everyone relates to it to Orthodox Church. Are there any other entities that carry on this tradition? Was it part of opera singing, maybe? Because it does sound a little bit like opera.
If you look at the history of Western music, you can also trace some elements back to Byzantine or ancient Greek music. But it's hard to. I'm not a musicologist. It's not my specialty there to tell you what exactly.
Yeah.
But things like the modes, if you look at Gregorian chant, for instance, in the West,
Yes.
it followed there's some obvious similarities there in terms of like they have the one melody, they don't have the chords, they don't have the harmonies, which came later.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, that was going to be one of my next questions. I mean, what distinguishes Byzantine chant from something like Gregorian chant? I mean, obviously it sounds very different, but I mean, it's hard to put your finger on what the difference is, other than acknowledging that this is very distinct in one respect, but this is also very distinct as well. Is there any relationship between the two?
I think there is, but as I said before, I'm not an expert in Gregorian chant, so I'll be careful in what I say there.
Yeah.
But I do know, because I've listened to Gregorian chant, and I've been exposed. I've been exposed to some. We actually have sang some Gregorian chant with in the old times. But one thing to note, remember I said before that Greek music has been uninterrupted for 3,000 years. Gregorian chant was actually lost. The tradition was lost. People stopped practicing it. And then they kind of went back and they tried to resurrect it, reconstruct it, if you like. Because we had the music, but how exactly they used to chant it, no one can tell you for sure. And people are doing amazing work to try to reconstruct it in how it might have sounded like.
Yep.
It's like the Hagia Sophia sound, like how it might have sounded like, but no one really knows for sure because there's no recordings from that time. So it's a bit like that. But even from those, listening to the style of music, you can see the similarities. You hear, okay, this is more like chanting. It's not folk music. It's not opera. It's not a classical.
So it's like its own genre, is that right?
Yes, it is. It's its own genre.
Different genre.
I would call it like the monophonic, unison ecclesiastical music, which then later became known as Byzantine chant. Yeah, Rebetika is similar.
Yeah.
Until Tzitzani came, if you look at the old Rebetika, they're all monophonic. They don't have these primo,
It's very
secondo.
D-based,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the D is the ison, right?
Yes.
So what does that mean for the non-musically minded people?
It means the simple melodies, not harmonized, not like you don't play multiple notes at the same time to create those nice harmonies.
Okay.
You have a very simple melody.
So it sort of starts ends instead of goes for...
Instead of vertical, think about horizontal melody that
Sure.
that like a chant,
Yeah.
for instance. Θα έρθω να σε ανταμώσω κάτω στην αλήθεια. It is the same concept, if you like.
Okay. So,
There isn't much variation in the.
so for me, it
tones of
sounded
the
like
voice.
high-pitched, and it was consistently sort of
Yeah.
high pitch. Is that what you're saying?
It's
To
not,
some
it's not so much the pitch, it's how many notes you have at the same time. So with one voice, you can do that. But to sing, for instance, classical music, polyphonic music, you need to have multiple people doing different voices at the same time. If you hear a four-part choir, for instance, they would have the tenors and the basses and the sopranos and the altos,
Yeah, got it,
all
got it.
singing different melodies at the same time, and it
Yeah.
gives you this harmony. It's called harmony.
Yeah, beautiful.
In some respect, it's a little bit limiting. Because as a student of music myself, I look at something like Rebetika and how like a tricordo buzuki is tuned. So I think it's DAD or
right.
DED or something. In many respects, it's kind of limiting, but there's lots of places you can take those notes and those melodies within that sort of thing. It's very interesting to see like how they've been able to sort of paint, so many different melodies and so many different things within that set group of notes.
Absolutely. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
That with 3 strings, they can create a whole genre of music that we admire,
Yeah.
appreciate to this day.
Fantastic. I'm still blown away by that song you sang. So it's 1,500 years old.
It's amazing.
That's crazy. Are there any songs that are older than that we still use today in church, for example?
Not that we use today. The oldest Christian musical fragment that we have is from the 3rd century. Yeah, it was discovered in a manuscript in Egypt years ago, and people have tried to from the ancient Greek notation that I mentioned earlier.
So what are they? What are the
That's
ancient
right.
Greek notations?
It's the letters that are upside down.
Alpha, Vita,
rotated.
what are they?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
So
don't remember off the top of my
Okay,
head now, but
yeah.
it's the alpha Vita
Yeah.
in different. Like if you have the upside down Vita, or if it's looking to the left or looking to the right, you got the Phi and the He.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then when Byzantine chant evolved from that, to this day, the Byzantine chant notation we use at church, like if you come to Cogra Church and come to the Psaltery and you look at the scores that we use, we still use the Greek punctuation marks for these.
Yeah,
Like we've got the comma, and we've got the dacia and the ipsili and the oxia, and all those
And
symbols.
it hasn't changed. Wow.
Yeah.
And they found that in a manuscript in Egypt, you're saying, around 300, 200 AD.
That's right, 3rd century. Yeah.
And what song was that?
This was a hymn to the Holy Trinity.
You know what he's going to ask you now, right?
I don't remember it off by heart. Yes.
Okay.
It's actually, but it's because we don't actually use that piece in church anymore. This has fell out of, I don't know how or when it was used in early worship. The worship we have now, it evolved over centuries. So
Yeah. Wow. Isn't that amazing? So they read this manuscript, and from there they could work out the words, I guess. The
It's
letters.
musical archaeology.
Yeah.
Yes.
Fuck, it
Amazing.
just still blows me away. I can't comprehend that.
I want to ask a personal question because I mean, for me personally, for some reason, I've always had an affinity for that piece, Agni Parthena. Amazing piece. What's the significance of it? I've never been able to. I've heard many versions of it. Whenever it comes up, I always feel a connection to it for some reason. What's the significance of it?
I think that piece became popular in the early 1990s.
Right. So it's relatively new.
For 2 reasons. Yeah, it was the poem itself was written by Saint Nectarios of Aegina,
Yes.
and he's a very beloved saint. So that was already a draw card. The second one was that the music was composed by Simonopetra Monastery in Mount Athos, and people revere Mount Athos. So there was 2 elements there. The third reason is that it was composed a little bit like sounds a little bit like a song, if you think about it. It's like it's got this mellow, yeah. And if you put those 3 things together, you can see how it became a hit, if you like, within the Greek Orthodox. But one thing that people don't realize is that this piece actually does not exist in any service that we have.
Yes.
So people try to find, okay, when shall we chant this at church? So they started chanting it after the service had finished originally. So the service would finish and then the chanter would start singing. Or during Holy Communion, if there was time and there was lots of people to have Holy Communion, then they would say, okay, what shall we sing? Okay, let's sing Agni
It's
Patya.
usually during Easter when the line's out the door,
Exactly.
down the street.
Exactly.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Okay, and what's the tune about?
It goes like Agni Parthene Despina Achrande Theoto Kechere Nymphia Nymphefte.
Fantastic.
Yes,
How good is this guy?
And you put the drone as well, and then
That is brilliant. That is so good. Far out. So Saint Nectarios wrote that.
he wrote the poem,
Wrote the
the
poem.
words. Yeah, the
Wow.
music is from a monastery in Mount Athos called Simonopetra. Yeah, a monk from that monastery composed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And are they still
love it.
creating new chants as we speak?
Of
all the
course.
time?
That is the beauty of our tradition. It's not like a museum where you've got something, we're going to sing something from 1,000 years ago. It's constant creation that happens. In fact, with my group, we're hoping to organize a concert in this year, hopefully, God willing, that it's dedicated to Australian Byzantine composers. Like
wow.
people in Australia composing Byzantine chant in the 21st century.
Far out.
So it's really remarkable to think.
See, I don't think people would know that at all. I think there's a very strong perception that this is something that's already been done and locked off is part of a museum and is, something that's, an item of curiosity as opposed to something that's a living and breathing entity still. That's amazing. Like how many composers are there now that are writing stuff that's still being put out there?
I would say hundreds.
Wow,
worldwide. In Australia, not that many. I would say a handful of people in Australia. But even that, if you think about it, 21st century in Australia, people compose Byzantine chant the same way that it was done in the 6th century or whatever. So, of course,
theoretically, though, sorry to interrupt. I mean, theoretically, if you, for example, had written a piece that was appropriate to some degree, would it be acceptable, say, for example, on a Sunday during one of those instances where the line's out the door for communion, to actually throw it in?
Yeah, and I have done it. In fact,
Wow.
one of my students had composed the piece, and I chanted it exactly at that time.
This is a revelation to me. This is brilliant.
But you see, the poems may be the same, the words may be the same, and you can just compose new music for it. So you can choose to do a music that someone else wrote hundreds of years ago, or you can choose to use music that someone composed yesterday, or even on the spot sometimes. But that's more rare.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. I just want to go back a bit of history. So any of the 12 apostles, did they write any of these poems that we do chants today? That you know of?
I don't know of any, no. But I do know that from the Bible, Christ, during the Last Supper, they chanted together with the apostles. So most likely they would have chanted some of David's psalms. And that's where the name psaltis come from pselno, because I sing the psalms, the psalmus. Yeah.
Okay.
That's why we say the psalterio. The psalterio is the chanter stand. It's called the psaltiri, which has the book of psalms. And that was initially in the early Orthodox Church. The primary book would be the book of Psalms.
So, I mean, just on that point, because I think it's important to note, Psalms is a book in itself in the Bible, and it does refer to, if I'm not mistaken, it refers to things that do need to be chanted, as opposed to anything else. Is that right, or is that a misunderstanding of the actual name of the book?
I think you can say that because in history that's what ended up happening. I don't know if they were originally written for that reason, but the legend has it that King David played those with music. But regardless of that, history has proven that both in spoken word and in music, it's probably the most popular ecclesiastical lyric, if you like, the lyrics that we use, the Psalms.
Amazing. Oh, here we go. So this is the most popular
the Psalms.
psalm ever. And
There's
that's
150 of them that King David wrote.
Oh, right. Okay.
150 Psalms. And during the different services,
Yeah.
the church just chooses from those 150.
Sure.
And sometimes we do Psalm 103, sometimes we do Psalm 44, and so on.
So those 150 are the most popular.
Across all
Across
ecclesiastical
all.
literature,
Yeah.
I would say that the Psalms are, because every service will have some part of Psalms.
Yeah, okay. So what's the most popular chant out there that you think?
Most popular chant.
What's the number one hit,
What's
he
the number
says?
one here?
Look,
Someone's thinking, but I didn't say it.
if you think about what's the piece that most people know, it would be Christos Anesti, I would say.
Okay,
Because
yeah,
that's the
right.
time when
Everyone comes out of the
everyone
woodwork.
comes out. and they all chant along. So
Yeah.
that's the most well-known one, I would say. Yeah.
That's a good point.
Followed by maybe Ti Permacho, perhaps from Makathisto Hymno. That's another thing where as soon as we start chanting it, the whole church starts singing along. It's a beautiful thing. When there's Kogar Church, we've got sometimes 1,000 people, and it's a wonderful thing to hear 1,000 people proclaiming that, and takes you back to Constantinople, how they would have chanted it when they were under siege and they took the icon of Panagia to the walls of Constantinople to save the city, and they would be chanting Ti Permacho.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a story. I didn't know that. So they take the Panagia icon and they go to the wall. It's just before the 29th, obviously.
That was before. That was in the 7th century, I believe,
Yeah.
when the Constantinople was under siege. And they took the icon of Panagia alongside the walls. They did this procession.
Yeah.
And that was around the time when the Akathist hymn was written.
Okay.
Somewhere the 8th century, somewhere there.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And we
Fascinating
sing it to
stuff.
this day, like the same thing. So that's an absolute beautiful thing about our tradition. It's evolved, but you always trace it back to the old times. It's new and it's old at the same time.
Yeah. Oh, that's just fascinating. I've got a new light now going into church. Hearing that, this is what they would have heard in Hagia Sophia.
And you go to Cogra, so
Yeah,
mate,
I do.
This is,
and I was going to say, it had improved. I don't know if I fit the intro. They were bad in the 80s. So I guess you've got...
It's all because of him.
Yeah, we've got you to thank.
You're just too kind.
No, you guys are going on another level. My mum's a regular. Actually, I'll ask my mum. I go, what's the salty like? I think
She's
it's
got
better.
season tickets, right?
Yeah, she's up the front somewhere. My mum and my auntie are up the front there.
Actually, I know where they sit because I've been a couple of times and I've seen them.
Yeah.
I usually go to St. Spiridon, but anyway.
Yeah.
Beside the point.
Regulars. No, that's fascinating stuff. Anything else you can tell us about Byzantine chanting that we should know?
I'll tell you something again that people don't know, and these little stories that fascinated me when I first found out. So go back like 500, 600 years, Ottoman Empire. So Greece, Constantinople, all was under Ottoman rule, and the Ottoman Empire, like the Byzantine Empire, it had people from all walks of life. They had Arabs, Greeks, Romanians, Persians, all sorts of different people. But those people did not have a musical system. So the Persians didn't have a musical system. The Arabs didn't have a musical. The Turks didn't have a musical system. Who had the musical system? The Greeks. And what the Greeks did, the Greek chanters who knew how they were trained in what we call today Byzantine Chant. They didn't call it Byzantine Chant, as we said, but they knew how to write music with that system. They recorded music from the other civilizations.
Oh, really?
So we have today, we have manuscripts from the 15th century, 16th century, and so on, of Persian music and Arab music and Turkish music, even Indian music,
Really?
written in Byzantine chant notation in manuscripts. That now the people from those nations, they rediscover or discover their own roots through the Byzantine chants that the chanters of the Greek Orthodox Church did hundreds of years ago.
Wow.
I was fascinated by that.
That's brilliant.
It is.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is, I think a few episodes ago when we spoke to, we did the episode on Whose Song Is This? And there was a lot of connection between Indian music as well, and trying to figure out where the particular songs came from. I mean, it's so interesting that we've played a role. Greece has played a role in not only preserving our own tradition, but the tradition of others. That's unbelievable. Honestly,
Yeah, it is. I was just going to say, so once the fall of Constantinople happened, I understand, did they continue to do chanting there?
They did.
Or was it done?
They did. However, as I mentioned before, they used to have the grandeur that they had before. They had chanters at the palace. The palace was no longer. They had chanters in processions. They had chanters in public worship. All these things ceased after the conquest. But churches continued to operate. And what happened is that a lot of the musical worship became more humble and subdued. So think about more like the Greek monasteries. If you've been to a Greek monastery, you can compare that style to a big cathedral, for instance.
Okay.
And then you can see how you've got now a single chanter, for instance, like you would in a local parish here. Usually they would have a single chanter, maybe two. But before the conquest, they would have choirs, they would have systematic trained choirs in Constantinople. Now, when Constantinople fell, the rest of the empire didn't have the same fate. So in other parts, they did continue to practice music, like in Mount Athos, for instance, continued uninterrupted.
Wow.
And that's the beautiful thing.
Yeah, wow. So Mount Athos, Ottomans or Turks never went there. Is that correct?
Well, it was under Ottoman rule, but
They just left
it enjoyed because it was such a remote place.
Yeah.
They left them to continue to operate and practice their art.
Okay.
Yeah.
A bit like us Suliotes, Tom.
Yes.
They left us alone too.
They did.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, well, because I did read an article as well that the last chant in Hagia Sophia was in like 1919. So I don't know if can you tell us anything about that?
Well, I can tell you that my papu was there when the Greek army went to Constantinople at that time with the allies. My papu was there. I don't know if he was there for the service, but there is again a legend that a priest went and tried to continue the liturgy that was stopped.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I don't quote me on the history there, but I think that they got stopped eventually. I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly.
Wow.
Because Greece would have held it, for a year at least?
Yeah. I don't know how much control they would have on those monuments, though.
Yeah. So your papu, what was...
Oh, he was a military officer. He was in the Greek army, so he followed, and he was sending postcards from Constantinople in 1919. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Super.
And obviously he survived, so...
He did, yes.
Yeah, what a story.
So you mentioned obviously that you're teaching this form at Cogger obviously now. Mm-hmm. What other efforts, or how do people learn about this now? How is the tradition being preserved elsewhere or anywhere in the world, let's say?
Well, it takes three things to learn Byzantine chant. It takes tuition, so you need to have a teacher who is not only knows but has lived through that experience. It's a very big difference, where someone who knows the theory of it and someone who has actually lived and breathed that tradition, so you can get the essence of it, the soul of it. So that's the fundamental part. The second one is to participate in the church services and be next to your teacher and sing along and do the drone and get your ears full of those sounds. That's as I was saying before, I was able to chant, and not just me, but everyone who does that, they're able to chant by osmosis, by hearing. You just don't know how to read it. It's like language. When we get born, when we're born, we are learning. We know how to speak Greek. We just don't know how to write it and read it, and then we go to school to read it. So you need a teacher, you need to participate in the service. And the third one is you need to put some personal study as well. Nothing happens like this. You can do some voice training, you can do exercises. And usually someone who is musically talented, usually 2-3 years, they should be able to chant fairly well. But to become a master, sometimes it takes 5-10 years, depending on the speed. Yeah.
Wow.
So who are the ones that we sort of look up to now? I've seen, for example, that particular priest, I think Koubaroulis, I think is his name, or something like that. I mean, he's become a bit of a superstar when it comes to this, particularly on social media. Are there rock stars of Byzantine chant in the world that people look to and think, that is a great example of what this is?
Definitely are. Like in every art form, there is a star system, if you like. The reference and the ultimate in performance style is the ecumenical patriarchate, which, as I said before, uninterruptedly since the Byzantine times until this day, they have. It's like the old chanters train the new ones, and the new ones train the newer ones. So they've got this chain of tuition that has happened through the centuries.
Wow.
And very high standards. So as a result, the ecumenical patriarchate chanters are considered the reference for the rest of the musical world.
Wow.
Mount Athos also has some great chanters historically that people look up to. And then there's everyone else. Different, people have beautiful voices. They create beautiful recordings, and they become very popular, as you said before. So that also happens. But the more you learn, the more you get drawn to the roots, the origins, which is the ecumenical patriarchate.
Beautiful. What an honor that must be to be part of that.
Indeed.
You're thinking of Father Nicodemos Gabarnos.
That's right. Yeah,
he's everywhere.
All over YouTube.
Yeah, he's everywhere. So do all the priests, archbishops, do they all get lessons in chanting?
I wish they did, but but not everyone does.
Could be a little side business for you.
Well, the classes are open to everyone, and we have had people who are my students, and now they became priests, and they're musical. But like everything else, not everyone is musical.
Yeah, sure.
So it's not a requirement to be musical in order to enter the priesthood. So you get a variety of people. You get the people who are, they've invested in learning, people who are more musically talented, and people who are less so.
Yeah.
There you go. Wow.
For someone like me who is, in inverted commas, a musician, I'm a self-taught musician. So if you put a piece of music in front of me, I don't know what to do with it. How important is it to be able to read this stuff as opposed to just memorizing it? Is it important? Is it vitally important that you can actually do that?
It depends on what you want to achieve. To become a chanter at church and be able to perform in a service, for instance, as a chanter, you don't necessarily need to be able to read. If you've got a good ear and you can listen and remember, this is what we call the empirical chanters. Empirical chanters, they're very good memorizing. The problem with that is that they can only perform the things that they've memorized.
Yeah.
So once you want to perform a different composition, then you stuck, or you have to listen to it and memorize it. But if you know how to read, you just open it up and you read it like a book.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
See, that'd be me, Nick.
That's
I'd
you.
have no idea.
No, but you're a good listener and you pick things up straight away. Like when we're doing that humming exercise.
No, that's nothing.
Mate, I didn't know what you said. You picked up you picked the same tune.
He's in a completely different note. He's got no
a different
idea.
stratosphere, mate. No, but I did read there is 9 different types of intelligence. Well, don't quote me. It could be 10 different types of intelligence, and musically gifted people, that's the top of intelligent. And it probably is super hearing, great memory, whatever it is. So fantastic. I was going to ask you one last question just about the scrolls that they found. Where are all these kept? Like, I'm sure there would have been so many of them. Are they kept in Mount Athos? Are they kept in Athens? Or
That's such a great question. I was hoping someone would ask me this question.
Well done.
Because when I found out, I was absolutely amazed that there are more than 7,000 manuscripts that are preserved, not in total, the ones that are preserved, 1,000 manuscripts worldwide that we know of, representing the work of more than 1,000 named composers. So more than 1,000 composers of this music, both secular and church, that I didn't know about them. Probably knew maybe a handful or 2,000. But there's more than 1,000, more than 7,000 manuscripts. Some of them are held in monasteries. Some of them are held in private collections. Some of them are held in museums.
okay, so they're all scattered.
Yeah. They're scattered, yeah.
And have you got to read any? Have you seen any?
I have. I've been very privileged to visit Mount Athos a few times.
Sure. Wow.
And I was able to hold one in my hands. And first thing I did is actually smell it. And just smell that. It's like on parchment paper or on
papyrus or
papyrus or skin, like animal skin. They would write. Yeah. So it is absolutely like I can't describe it. How amazing it is to even hold like 11th century, 10th century.
Yeah, definitely.
In your hands, and yeah.
And you read it and you worked out who the composer was.
Yes, but I can't sing from it because that's another thing that happened. The notation actually evolved through the centuries, even though the practice remained uninterrupted. The notation, the way they used to write it, changed. They made it more and more analytical, more and more expanded. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the old times, the paper was not a commodity, so paper was very expensive. So very few people had the privilege to have a book or a paper. So what they invented this shorthand notation. So you saw a sign, and then this sign would remind you to do a whole page of music just by seeing this sign.
Yeah.
But then later generations, as technology improved, and then people could write on paper, and then they started writing more expanded, and then it became easy. You didn't have to remember so much.
Yeah. There you go, shorthand. So it sounds like there's a lot of relics in Mount Athos. Did you get to see much?
I did, yes, and I recommend it to everyone who has a chance to go. You have to ask, yes. show me some monasteries will show you proactively, but sometimes the people who know, they go and ask, can you show me some of these? Some monasteries will have a museum internally, but often these are kept in libraries and treasuries for obvious reasons, because they're extremely precious, and they have to preserve them from temperature and from thieves and from all sorts of even the dust in the air can damage them. They're very, very delicate. But if you go and seek it, then there's amazing experiences to be had.
So give us an example of what's there. What have you seen? Are there saints there? Do we know?
The relics of saints is the first and foremost. People see. Sometimes you go to a monastery and they have a display of 20 or 50 saints,
really?
Relics of saints.
Who's there?
From Saint John the Baptist to the hand of Saint Mary Magdalene, to the gifts of the Magi in the Christmas.
So Mary Magdalene's hand.
They've got the belt.
John the Baptist.
The belt of Panagia, the only remaining item of Panagia. There's nothing else. There's no other relic of Panagia. They have it at Vatopedi Monastery. They've got the head of Saint John Chrysostom, and they've got pieces from the reed that they gave Christ to hold during his passion. All sorts of it's incredible amount of
unbelievable.
Yeah. I can't describe it.
I'd like to know more about that.
Well, I'll tell you, recently, I mean, this is a bit off topic, but recently, Akis Peteretsikis did an episode of his show where he went to Mount Athos, and oh my God. If that doesn't encourage guys to take the decision to go and to experience that, I don't know what will. It was such a beautiful experience. And this is, he's centering the whole thing around food at the end of the day. Everything that you've just described, that by itself is a reason to go.
Yeah, far out. I'm still blown away. I can't believe that. So they got Panagia's belt.
That's right.
Far out. Yeah. That's unbelievable. I was going to say, and you mentioned there's they have to protect because people might steal it. I thought this was Mount Athos. Aren't they all holy? But
not the monks. Yeah, it's the visitors.
The visitors.
Not everyone goes there with the mindset of venerating. Unfortunately, people are like that.
Yeah, because I did hear there was a police force on there on Mount Athos.
There is too. Yeah.
I thought that would have been the cushiest job, Tom, but but you're right. It's the visitors that go.
And they get visitors from all around the world as well. So
Yes.
it's not just Greek Orthodox people who go there. There's people who are just curious and they go there, or they've heard there is treasures there. And the pirates used to go find these, and they would loot the place. That's why
Really?
they've built the monasteries like castles, so
And
that
they
they
are,
could protect
yes.
from the pirates. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So have you had the opportunity to chant?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well,
What was that
my
like?
brother is a monk in Mount Athos, so
wow.
I've been visiting regularly and had the privilege to chant there multiple times. It is very different because it's a monastery. It's like you're entering a different world. It's not in a local parish. Obviously, it has a different character. It's more like, if you like, it's more worldly. If you like, there's people walking about. There's young kids. More ceremony in that sense. In the monasteries, the people who are there for a specific reason, and they know exactly what is happening, and they it's a different level of spirituality, I would say, that just transcends, combined with the history and the environment. You're in a church that was built in the 5th century, and there's the vestments and the relics and the icons and the everything around just takes you back to the Byzantine time. So you think, it's not like you hypothesize. You know that's how it was 500 years ago, potentially even longer than that.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've got to ask though. A brother at Mount Athos, a sister who is you're mentioning off air. What's her title now? She's a nun.
Abbess, the abbess of the monastery. Yeah.
Wow. What happened to you, mate?
Well, I usually say that someone's got to chant. So I am.
That's good.
And he plays his part.
That's it. No, but okay. So you were there at the enthronement of your sister as well. Did you have an opportunity there to chant, perhaps?
Of course, I chanted with my brother from Mount Athos, who was visiting at the time. So that was one of the most special times of my life, personally. And
Take us through that. What was that like for you personally to be able to play that role and be in that position?
It's what I said before. It's like you go to a church service and you participate in a church service, and it just takes it to another level, feeling like you actually participated, not just attended, if you know what I mean.
Sure.
And of course, you don't have to chant to participate, but it just makes it really like you have to participate. Yeah. If you are the chanter, you're part of it. You have to know what is happening. You have to understand what you're chanting. You have to understand what is being said and how to say it. And make sure, and this is the hardest part, not only for yourself, but also to convey that to the people who are listening as well. And this is one of the biggest challenges we have here in Australia, in that because we do chant in the Bible Greek language, it's hard for people to understand. It's even hard for Greeks in Greece to understand what is being chanted. And although I think it's very good that we're doing this, it is a real challenge at the same time for people to follow and understand. And once you understand what is being said, like I said before, like τι υπερμάχος στρατηγότα νύκτηρ, what does it actually mean?
Yes.
Yeah, Χριστός ανέστη εκ νεκρών, what does it actually mean? That's where it takes the whole experience to the next level. So being there and participating with people that I love from life, but also I love being around and having that service almost became like a family occasion, if you like. So, but that's a one-off. That for me, it's a lifetime event, if you like.
That's brilliant. So some of the chants, are they done in ancient Greek language, or is it modern?
Actually, all of the church worship is done in what is called the Koine Greek, which is the Greek language of the time of Jesus, or the Hellenistic times.
Okay, they call it Koine Greek.
Koine, yeah, it's called Koine because it was used all around the Eastern Mediterranean at the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or in the English tradition, they refer to it, or the Catholics refer to it as Koine Greek.
Koine, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and they haven't modernized that, because I struggle to understand what they say. But
you're not alone. Like even people who speak modern Greek really well, like you, they struggle to understand. Yeah. That's why in recent years, what we see in Australia and other English-speaking countries like the US and UK, there's a concerted effort to translate the services.
Yes.
And then compose new music based on the Byzantine style on the English text. And it's people have done a really decent job.
It's very interesting that they do that. Every time I hear one of those services, though, somehow I feel like there's something missing. I love it, and it obviously plays an important role in the understanding and whatnot, but I don't know, there's something about hearing it in the Greek. We've spoken about this before.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Even in the language, the spoken language, I think you'd probably agree, Dimitri, that everything just has more of an impact in Greek, even if you don't understand it somehow.
I would totally agree.
Yeah, I agree, because I've heard it too in English, and you're right. There's something missing. I know what you mean now.
But the same debate was happening with the Catholics back in the 60s when they started to say, moving from the Latin Mass, and which is still controversial in the Catholic tradition in many respects, because up until that point you couldn't. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that you weren't allowed to own a Bible in English, for example. You know what I mean? It was all in Latin, and that was the language of the day. It was sacrilege to have one. So it's very interesting, that on one hand, it's very important that we understand it, but there's a certain element that even those of us who wouldn't understand it would still feel like there's something missing.
Yeah. Look, I'm a big traditionalist. Even though I don't know what they're saying, I get a better feeling when I hear it in that tone. Yeah,
isn't it funny?
It is, but we could be the last generation, Tom, where it's like, we know both. We're hearing the English, but we're hearing the traditional. Our kids, our grandkids might not know that. They may say, the English version's better. I don't know, but it's good that you guys are keeping the tradition. So
you might be surprised. I think we all might be surprised that kids these days, not all of them, but a lot of them are trying to discover the roots.
Yes.
And they appreciate the same way you appreciate and I appreciate.
Yeah.
You have people who are non-Greeks who are going back to chanting Greek. Like if you look what's happening in the US, for instance, there's people who are now teachers of music and they're non-Greek background.
And it's for 3,000 years. We don't want it to stop now.
It will not stop.
Not under your watch.
Yeah.
Definitely not.
Well, that's where I want to sort of wrap this all up. We kind of touched on it at the beginning when it comes to, maybe some singers that have been influenced by it. But I mean, how has Byzantine chant sort of influenced modern music? I listen to Greek music and I hear it everywhere. But for the layperson and for yourself, maybe, like, do you hear it as often as maybe I do when it comes to hearing the influences? Do you see it?
I do. That's also because as you were saying before, I've been involved with the folk music as well, which is the same style, and I hear it in the progression of the melody. I hear it in the cadences that they use. I hear it in the scales that they use sometimes. I don't know if
in-between notes that I keep hearing.
The microtones, exactly, the scales that they spot on. A lot of what we call endichna, like the art Greek music songs in the last 20, 30 years, they started introducing traditional instruments. So you hear more of an oud or more of a kanonaki. Even Lara, when he came, he had the kanonaki in his band, which may not have happened potentially, 30 or 40 years ago.
Yeah.
You hear singers like Eleftheria Arvanitaki and many, many others. Now there's a multitude of singers who introduce the instruments and they introduce the scales. And then once you start going into that musical sphere, what do you find? You find the Byzantine influence through that.
Yep.
Yeah, and you hear the drone. Like, next time you hear to some songs, try to hear songs with the drone. There's many of them that have that.
There is.
I will now. Look, it just reminds you when I went backpacking in Europe in 95. I was a young kid, 21. And I was in Rome. And I don't know, I wasn't happy. I just wasn't in a good place. I couldn't speak the language. I didn't fit in. I couldn't settle in. And by the third day, I thought, I'm a bit over Rome. I hadn't gone to Greece yet. I thought, one last stop, and I Googled this, it was like Let's Go Europe guidebook. There was no internet back then, Tom, and I looked at it, and there was there was a Greek monastery in Rome, a couple of k's out. The monks would make their own wine, like for $2 or something, and being a backpacker, that was fantastic. So I went out there, and again, I was a bit agitated.
Priorities.
Yeah, no, but I really wanted something comforty because I hadn't been home for 4 or 5 months by then, because I went travelling all through Europe and anyway, so I went out, got there. I remember I sat down, I was the only one there, and I could hear those hymns. It was beautiful, honestly. I felt so relaxed. If you ever, I don't know, I felt stressed, anxiety, but all that just disappeared. And I don't know what it was. Maybe it was the sounds, it was a familiar sound for me as a young kid, 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old, but it was just a beautiful, beautiful sound, and it just really recharged me. That's how I felt. I didn't end up buying the wine. So no, I didn't need it.
Honestly, it's so interesting because I've found myself doing the same thing in the same sort of scenario where, you're not feeling 100% yourself. I have stumbled upon a time where I've listened to something like that and it's made me feel infinitely better somehow. There's something about it's in our DNA, I feel.
I think you're both right.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
But who would have thought? Middle of Rome, there's a church with monks, and I was the only one there, and they're all staring at me. Sort of. I could see it, but it was beautiful. Yeah, and I just wanted to finish. Actually, one last question, very important question. Who's the better singer, you or your brother?
Clearly, my brother is the better singer. He gets a lot more practice than I do, I can tell you, in the monastery. But he's wonderful. He's just absolutely phenomenal.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
You're not just being humble.
No, I'm not. It's objectively, he's... ask anyone else, and they will tell you.
He's got you covered. Oh, that's all right. But you're in Australia, I guess.
We both managed to go away from as away as we could have as a remote, I guess. He went to Mount Athos. It takes 10 hours to get there.
Yep.
Wow.
It takes 24 hours to come here. So
yeah.
Well, it's amazing that your family has each done their bit, let's say, to sort of keep these traditions alive, teaching this form, and taking an active interest in it. It's absolutely fantastic. Dimitri, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I know that there's so much more that we could cover about this, and which I'm sure there'll probably be text messages flying back and forth over the next few weeks. So, mate, Dimitri, thank you so much for being on the show and for helping us kick off season 4 of the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Dimitri, mate. Great having you. Awesome. You're a gentleman, and you're keeping this 3,000-year-old tradition going. How good's that? How do you feel about that?
It's my duty to do so.
Yeah,
amazing.
Keep it traditional, mate. We love it.
Fantastic. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about that. I mean, it really is about that, you know, upholding these traditions, making sure that we're talking about them, get involved as well. Like, if you have an interest in it, Dimitri, tell us again, where can people find you in terms of, you know, whether learning, or tell us about melisma as well. Where can we look you up?
So there is the Byzantine Music School, Byzantine Chant School of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese in Australia, in all major cities. There's branches of that, so Kogarah, Redfern, in Melbourne, in Adelaide, remote or in-person teaching. So there's great opportunities in Australia, also overseas. There's schools in the US who also teach online. Greece, obviously, has schools that also teach online and in person. So plenty of schools, plenty of opportunities. Here in Australia, the lessons start usually February or early March. Tuition is very cheap because it is something that we do out of our, as I said before, as a duty, not as a profession to profit from. And it's open to everyone. There's kids classes, there's adult classes.
Brilliant. What a champion.
Fantastic.
How good's that, eh?
I love it.
3,000-year-old tradition, and Dimitri's keeping it going.
That's it.
One of our people, mate.
That's it. Everyone's playing their role. Well, again, Dimitri, thank you so much. Again, guys, look up melisma as well. Make sure you're, you know, stay involved in your local community, and if you can get involved in this sort of thing, if you're interested, make sure you do, because it's all part of it. It's all part of our... Definitely. It's not just part of our culture, it's part of our faith, it's part of our traditions. Yeah. All of it is important.
Definitely. And look, thanks for improving the Psalti boy down at Kogarah. I'll be listening out, but they have improved. I have heard it. So Father Athanasios is doing good things over there. Yeah. Good man.
He is. You're going to hit your buzzer next time you hear them as well? You're going to turn your chair around or what?
I think I will. Yeah, I will.
Love it. Fantastic.
Well done. Thank you, mate.
ouzotalk@outlook.com is the email. Follow us on social media at Ouzo Talk and at Ouzo_Talk on Instagram. For the first time in season 4, Nick Athanasiou, thank you very much, mate. And Dimitris Koubaroulis, thank you for being here.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Ouzo Talk is produced, written and presented by Tom Skolarikas and Nick Athanasiou. Our theme music is written and played by Peter Apostolidis, with additional music from George Kalapidis and Bouzouki legend Thanasis Polykadriotis.
Ακολουθήστε μας στο Soundees, στο Spotify, στο Apple Podcasts και στο Google Podcasts.